Okay, we are going to continue now. So we are going to begin now with the presentation of two experiences related to the competent person. And our first speaker will be Pepe Menendez from Catalonia, Spain. Pepe is the Deputy Director of Jesuitis Educación. He has been a teacher and coordinator in St. Ignatius and principal of the school John the 23rd in La Hospitalité in Barcelona. His emphasis is in successful implementation of the ICT projects. He will say more about this later. And establish close working relationship with educative and social agents to raise standards, academic standards and human standards. He also promoted special programs to integrate disabled students into regular classrooms and education. Develop an association of European schools. Pepe presents now the experience of Jesuitis Educación from Barcelona, Catalonia, engaged in a project of a deep transformation of education. Welcome, Pepe, and thank you for helping us with this.
Thank you. Hola, buenos días a todos.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Our presentation has a special feature. It's not really the presentation of a school, but rather of a network of schools. So here we are going to be introducing a differential element, different from the way of doing things in the 21st century, okay? Typical of the 21st century. It's not one single school, but a network of schools. Approximately 4 or 5 years ago, we started working on the idea not so much of defining a strategic plan in which we considered we could develop stable growth, but rather we specified what our eagerness was for a deep change that we were dreaming with for education, something that we thought was necessary in order to be able to respond to the demands of the 21st century. How did we go about it? Well, we linked it up to what we were doing. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but following the line that Montserrat del Pozo was telling us about before, we wanted to take advantage of past experience, all the good things that we had worked on in the past. But however, working on the eagerness of where would we like to be in the year 2020. So before any question, let me tell you, 2020 is an excuse. I mean, where will we be in the year 2020? Well, dreaming where we want to go in the year 2040. Obviously, it's just an excuse. If that not were the case, we would have failed if in 2020 we are satisfied, yeah? So, essential features, creativity. We talked about it yesterday. It was mentioned very much indeed in one of the groups. And today we were talking about this too. Vision and future. The world is changing profoundly. The world is changing. This is an image that for us can be very useful. For us, this is something daunting, surprising. I mean, somebody said, I would never have imagined there could be 2 popes, but listen, we might get to 3. It depends on the time we live, or how long we live for. Education is changing as well. Roles are changing, and many people are gaining in hope. I was happy to listen to somebody yesterday talking about what it means for women, the fact of education changing, Malala's example. So the world is changing for many of our students. That is crucial, strategic. What is Jesuitas Educación? This is a map of the city of Barcelona. We have an advantage in Barcelona. Only in the city of Barcelona there are 6 schools. The 7th that you can see slightly on a side is in Hospitalet, where I was the director. It's a kind of city, a town next to Barcelona. The distance is half an hour, 30 minutes between the schools. So 7 schools in a limited geographical area. 7 schools of different social and economic levels. The 8th school is 175 kilometers away. So we're talking of a small lab, aren't we? A mini educational system. So this then was something that at a given point in time the provincial in Catalonia defined as a horizon to eventually become one single Jesuitic institution, to make those 8 schools become one single Jesuit institution working or as a network. What I'm showing you is real images of the schools that belong to this network. We have started a specific experience this year. I have to say that this is a deep change for us. But why? Because we are loyal to the educational mission. It's not the result of a crisis in any of the schools. It's not the result that we get less people wanting to enroll in our schools. It doesn't happen because we are in times of an economic crisis. No. It's the result of our eagerness of wanting to go towards the future. It's the result, as has been pointed out a while back, well, of, you have to fight against what works properly. Our schools do very well. They obtain very good results. In the best records of baccalaureate, we have an important percentage of people coming from our schools. So we are successful. But there was an essential element that we were not achieving. What was it? That our students gained projection towards the 21st century, being people that could transform the world, people that could actually manage that lifelong project that would enable them to transform the world. In our preparation, we have been very careful in separating two things that typically make it difficult to think about education. It's the what and the how. We defined 1 year with the participation of the whole educational community. 13,000 students participated in the question of what is the school you dream with. Then all the people, the staff participated, the teachers, in the question, what's the school that you dream about? We couldn't gain access to the 11,000 families, but we did get 800 families to participate directly in this question too. Our question was, what do you dream about? Not how we're going to do it. Because the how makes the discussion very difficult. Because, okay, somebody would say, I dream about a school that makes education very personal. Oh, but how are you going to achieve that with 30 students in the class? Hey, we dream first. Let us define first the framework of what our dream is, what we want to do. And a year later, which was last year, in fact, we did go systematically about how we were going to implement this. How are we going to make the dream come true? And then something essential, of course, is the full involvement of everybody. The teachers themselves, when we started with the process, well, the teachers said, oh, families won't be interested in this. But, however, when the process had been going on for about a year, and we said, we told the families about our dream, and we summarized the ideas that their kids had actually told us, the families would say, we are so proud that we belong to an institution that in times of economic recession is thinking about our children's future. That for us was really important. It meant full involvement of the whole community. Students gave us very interesting ideas. There's a website address that is there in English, Spanish and Catalan. And there you can read all the comments and different stages of the process. The students said, we have sad schools, the colors are sad. Teachers sometimes are angry when they come into the classroom because they want to keep us all in order. And some teachers think that entering a class with an angry face is going to make the class be tidy and quiet. And they think that the mission of the student is to fight against disorder and destroy order and to go against rigidity, they would tell us. So what did we work on and how did we go about things? Well, think that we're talking of the 4th year of the process of this experience already, yeah? The first year, especially, remember, was about the what, but then came the how. For that, we needed a previous diagnosis and then see what it means to teach and learn in the 21st century. Coincidentally, we visited the Montserrat school. We wanted to learn about their experience in greater detail to think better about the change we wanted. So, systemic change, that's a key concept. Okay, systemic change. Because we came already, especially as regards technology, from a stage in which small changes would lead nowhere. Or even worse, small change meant stress and fatigue of the staff. And it was impossible to sustain innovation with small changes. So we realized we needed deep change. We needed deep systematic change in everything. So a huge experience, get teachers to work in curricular selection. And colloquially, we talked about pruning, okay? But I mean, in fact, it means the selection of the curricula. So a huge process, a huge experience, because teachers themselves live a kind of inside mourning, saying, I have to select, I have to choose, I have to break away or forget a belief of learning in students, okay? Teachers very often say, I have to complete the whole curricula because when I talk, the student is learning. And of course, that is a huge mistake, and it's like a burden that teachers have been carrying for so long. Then project methodology, multiple intelligences, all those are instruments, tools of our dream, of our mission. We want our students to learn, and all these are tools. So in this sense, we're not really elaborating a methodology. We're not even actually stating publicly that we believe in a given methodology, but rather we are going in the direction of a goal. We want our students to be competent, to be able to live in the world they will have. And here in Spain, we're living it very intensively, yeah, that we have well-prepared students that eventually don't get a job in what they specialize in, and they have to travel abroad. Students as well with low levels of qualification are the ones that stay in Spain, and that for us is a social drama to take into account. Beware. So anyway, a new evangelization dynamic, not new evangelization, but rather a new way of understanding the evangelization process of the students. We are not questioning concepts. We are questioning the way in which the students can be invited to think about the referential figure of Christ and see what Christ means in hope, and also questioning of life and the unfair origin of social structures. So throughout this process, the student is very much at the center. Montserrat was mentioning this. We worked in it too, group integration, and then the incredible paradox, which the more students you have in the classroom and the more teachers, the greater personalizations you get. This is incredible, and it goes against that old idea of having very few students for a teacher, yeah? The famous ratio. And people would say, no, you need very few students with one teacher. And well, in fact, we see that the more the better, because people learn in contexts of difficulty and accompaniment. So the student is always at the very center of the learning process. This year, this course, we started on 2 specific experiences. It's important to take into account that we are a school network, 8 schools, that's 1,300 students. For us, it was important to introduce changes at different social and economic levels, but in this case, not all at the same time, not all simultaneously. We thought that, well, we would feel safer making headway like this and not really changing everything in all the schools at once with structures, with personal stories of schools that didn't have the same level of preparation. So 3 and 4-year-old students in 4 schools, and from 11 to 14 in 3 schools. Well, listen, the first day, September 15th, the way the students would look at you, it was the 3 wise men day, or the Christmas day look, yeah? Do you know what I mean? Because we got photographs, you know, and the way our students were surprised, and they said, is this my school? That boring, sad, daunting school. Is this my school? Yeah, I know, I'm coming to an end. So we took these pictures. So all in all, 800 students and 65 teachers in these 2 experiences. But listen, the experience was for the 8 schools, okay? Not for these 3 schools where we started. Understand? We operate as one single educational institution, and we work in a network. So the 8 schools become involved and learn. It's not 3 schools and I look and see what happens to them, but in a parallel way, we all work at the same time, because we are creating the conditions for change in all 8 schools of the network. And then think as well on this new relationship with the families, yeah? We've started, for example, to get feedback on the competencies of the families to see if some families might help us in specific activities in the classroom. For us, it's a different education for a different world. But this photograph is very symbolical. Nobody asked how things will be in 3 years' time. We don't know. So, on the one hand, we want to build a future, but then on the other hand, we know that now it's impossible. We don't know whether in 3 years' time we'll have 3 popes. We don't know whether in 3 years' time Catalonia will belong to Spain or not. We don't know whether in 3 years' time the European Union will still exist. We don't know so many things, but we do know that we believe in this lifelong project of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Pepe. And now I'm going to introduce you Rosario Martinez. Rosario comes from Guatemala, and she is the pastoral coordinator of our school, Liceo Javier. We had 2 schools in Guatemala City, and I have the opportunity to visit them recently. She works there also. She also works in our university there in Guatemala City, the Landívar University, and she is also a member of the Apostolic Council of the Society of Jesus in Guatemala. She has worked for many years in the Christian formation in different schools throughout Guatemala, and she really provides a lot of experience about what is Christian formations and the importance of Christian formation for us. She has also participated in writing a book about Jesuit education for the 21st century, and so she's coming here to help us to see another project. So thank you, Rosario. We are very happy to have you here, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for granting me the opportunity to be here with you. It is a pleasure and a tremendous commitment also to come and share with you. I've come here to introduce the book we've written at the school around how to form and assess the key competencies for life in our students. It is a book, what I'm going to introduce to you, but what's important is not so much the book, but rather the experience accumulated at the school that has resulted in the writing of the book. This school was founded in 1952, and so we were celebrating the 50 years not so long ago. It is important to note that that was a time for us to start a renovating phase. We started thinking that this traditional curricula we've heard about, where teachers lecture and transmit and convey to the students all their knowledge and wisdom, and the students are just recipients of all that knowledge, that kind of model was not working so well for us anymore. We started feeling, as Pepe was saying, students were bored, classrooms had this grey atmosphere, and that was not either what the Society of Jesus was asking of us in terms of the educational paradigm, in terms of having students reflect and do all this self-teaching. And so we started thinking, and we published this book entitled Key Competences for Life. And we started applying it to the classroom, but there were many shortcomings. We made many mistakes. One was that we didn't have enough, perhaps, theoretical ground to build on for teachers to train themselves. What's this? How do we draft up plans of studies for the classroom to put this into practice? So with trial and error, we started working, and a group of teachers got together again, and at the beginning of 2014 we've published this book that you see up there, which is a result of all the experience and aims at answering some key questions such as what's a competence, what are the key competences, how are we to define them, what are the values that must be integrated in the training on the basis of competences in a school of the Society of Jesus, what changes in terms of methodology, planning, assessment need to take place for the development of such competences, all these questions. And so the first chapter wants to give answers to all those questions. What are key life competences? We venture a definition in the book, and this is a definition based on the Delors report, based on the 4 pillars for education in the 21st century. We say that competences are a dense, complex, integrated, dynamic system of various knowledges of 3 fundamental types. Concepts, which is the knowledge concerning knowing in strict terms. Then there's procedures, which would be knowing how to do rather than knowing things. And then knowing how to be and live together, which are the attitude, value-related knowledge elements. And all this knowledge, being competent, is what human beings manage to develop to certain quality standards. And so competences are not about all or nothing. It's not about being or competent or completely incompetent or black and white, but rather this is a continuum in terms of the levels at which you command all those knowledge aspects. And so this knowledge enables people to solve problems. This is the basis of the competencies. You train people on the basis of competencies to solve problems in context. And this makes subjects able to realize themselves as human beings, as citizens, and as professionals. Which is why I want to emphasize the idea Mother Monse was sharing with us, and we were thinking about this too. I want to reiterate the importance of how being competent, at least that's my opinion, within an institution belonging to the Society of Jesus would mean being competent, compassive, committed, and conscious, of course. And chapter number 2 is the one I'll go into greater detail on. This is the longest chapter. It takes up the lion's share of the book, and there we identify 16 competencies that we believe everybody ought to develop in order to live and lead a full life. And we start defining the competence in quite a lot of detail. This is just an example, and you probably have it there before your own eyes in the documentation you've been receiving. So we define the competence very specifically so that teachers do not get lost, as it were. So what do we mean when we say we're developing this particular competence in students? And then for each competence, we give dimensions in order to clarify what it means to develop that particular competence. And for each of those dimensions, we have established achievement indicators in 3 phases following the Piaget evolution stages: the pre-operational, specific operations, and formal operations. And so there is a number of indicators for teachers to use in order to define their plans of study. And of course, this is not static, this is work in progress. In chapter number 3, we defined a group of values. And for that, we've inspired on the shared educational project for Latin America, where we establish where the values that we want to develop for the whole of Latin America have been defined. And so we followed that same structure. We explained the value. We initiate it or declare it. We define it. What do we understand in Liceo Javier that solidarity, for instance, means, because it can be defined in many ways. So we establish what it means for us, and we establish, again, a number of dimensions and indicators so that we can monitor how students are developing and getting training around that value. Chapter 4 would be school profiles that establish what a primary student, a secondary student ought to be like, and there we integrate values and competences in order to come up with those ideal profiles. And then the following chapter, this is a picture of our children. Chapter number 5 is all about methodology. We describe the how. How do we develop competences in the classroom? And here we do away with the paradigm, the traditional paradigm of a teacher-lecturer in a traditional setting, where with just a book, teachers talk at the students. We do have some books, brother, not so many, but we are not doing away with books altogether, not yet, at least. And so this methodology is what we call the double period. We haven't come up with a better name. We used to have 40-minute periods, maths 40 minutes, then language 40 minutes, and then the double period means that we've defined ample periods of 80 minutes where students can develop and learn better. This methodology is inspired by the Ignatian pedagogical paradigm, understood not so much as a number of steps, a sequence of steps, and not as a methodology, but rather understanding the paradigm as a source of inspiration, as the northern star that helps us find our way in our teaching tasks. And inspired on the paradigm, and I must say that each of the steps of this methodology might not necessarily take place in this particular order, and teachers can play with the methodology, but we establish inspired or on the basis of the paradigm, we come up with this methodology. And there we have an introduction, a motivating introduction, where the teacher asks a question, usually something related to the student's everyday life, and that enables them to activate their previous knowledge. And here we have the context, social, economic, and personal context of the students, where they are, how they are feeling that particular day, how prepared and ready they are to learn. And then with that question, you generate the cognitive imbalance, we call it. So there is that imbalance there, the tension, there's some problem that needs to be solved, and that's motivating. After that comes personal work and cooperative work. And here, what we've done is apply experience, reflection, and action. There's personal work where students study individually. They read, they study certain concepts, or they experience individually. For instance, in science, they have a personal experience, they reflect upon it, and we suggest that teachers ask questions, not literal questions, not questions to get a closed answer, but rather inferential questions that lead students to the cognitive target and to self-regulation, constantly monitoring and assessing their own learning process. And once all that individual work has taken place, they move on to the cooperative work. They get together with other students and share everything they've learned, everything they've worked on individually. So they ask questions, doubts they may have, and together they build knowledge. They finish with a session for sharing, and this helps them answer questions, present what they've learned, present where they ended up with all that learning. And this is also a time for assessment, where there is an assessment of the knowledge that has taken place. But obviously assessment is something that happens all throughout, not only at the end. There is a constant training assessment whereby teachers are not sitting down while people are working individually or in groups, but constantly teachers move around, assessing, correcting mistakes timely, not wait until the end, but as they go along, teachers guide them, correct whatever needs correction. And then, finally, we've got chapters, I'm almost done, chapters 6 and 7 with reflections and a model for what didactic sequences ought to be. And so here, we provide examples for teachers for how to integrate competencies to their learning plans. And so we see that the key task for teachers in this change is their key role is the planning. In order to get to the classroom the way they ought, they need to be very structured in their planning in order to suggest relevant work to students. Teachers are not the key role, they are just accompanying the protagonist, the leading role. Center stage is for students. And then chapter 7 would have some models for assessment on the basis of competences, because obviously if didactic sequences are wonderful and the curricula is wonderful and we end up assessing the way we used to, then everything we've done is pointless. I would rather be doing away with everything in the last minute. Tell me about the way you assess and I'll tell you the way you learn. So this is key also, the assessing method. We've encountered quite a few difficulties. One of the biggest difficulties has been the resistance to change. We've found in teachers, because they felt they were losing power, as it were. It's not us who call the shots anymore, but rather the students. And throughout the process, there are many doubts also on the part of students. Sometimes students move much faster than teachers, and that generates a lot of insecurities in the team, which is why, and I want to insist on this, and the people who spoke before me have also said this, it is very important to train teachers. This is of utmost importance, not so much at the beginning, before we start, but constant training, constant updating of the teachers' training. They plan together, we do sessions throughout the year, we learn from successes and failures, we share the mistakes we've made in the classroom, and we share, don't try that because that didn't work, or try this, that worked really well for me. And sometimes it works in some groups, something works in a group and it doesn't work in another group. So teachers need to have that forum for exchange, and they need to, be willing to engage in all this with in our institutes with a clear Ignatian identity too. Thank you. Thank you, Rosario.
Thank you, Rosario, for presenting us this experience of what you are doing in Guatemala City at Liceo Javier. So now we will have also some more time for open discussion, and I'm going to suggest again that we begin with just some personal reflection. What are the feelings that I have now? What are the thoughts that cross my mind at this point? During the past open discussions, we had participation from Spain, Brazil, United States, Argentina, Ireland, Paraguay, India, and Canada. I'm going to invite you again to do what we did first, and is you share with your neighbor a little bit of your feelings and thoughts at this point. That could be helpful. So please, 2 or 3 minutes.
Tu saps qui és el de Nepal? El de Nepal. Aquest? Ah, vale, vale, vale. Sí, 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 clar. Bueno, podem anar a visitar. Bueno, ara anava a mirar perquè que la correctora just ahir em va dir que no, haig de buscar un altre i és obrir l'ordinador per anar a contestar correus i que surti alguna cosa.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are going to continue now. And just before opening the floor again for discussion, I want to make sure that we are aware that there is a question here, the question that Paul asked, that is a question for all of us, and is why do we need to change the way we teach? Why we need to change the way we do things at the school when we have good academic results? That is an important question for many Jesuit schools, because they do have good academic results. I don't know if that is a good thing, but they do have good academic results. And I say that I don't know if it's a good thing. Of course, it's a good thing, but I don't know, because sometimes that is the excuse not to change. Pepe was also saying during his presentation that they decided to change not because they didn't have good academic results, but rather because they thought that they needed to serve the mission better. So those things are there, and I just want to point out that there are certainly things that a very important point that I also see, and when I had the opportunity to visit many schools, Jesuit schools, They do very well. They do have very good answers about the what. Sometimes the how is not that clear. But that's our challenge, and that is why we are doing this today. I also want to point out that we have heard 3 different models today, the one from Montserrat, the one from Jesuites Educación here, and the one also from Guatemala. These are different models. The idea is we don't need to decide which one is the one that I want. Rather, the idea is that this can inspire us to do our own journey, to build our own highway, to build our own building. So just for you to keep all this in mind. So let's open the floor now for discussion. So who wants to ask questions or intervene? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't know if you can follow, but you are now in charge of that. 1.
Enrique Gutiérrez, de Colombia.
Enrique Gutiérrez from Colombia. Well, first, thank you, Jose and Rosario, for your presentations, sharing your experiences. There's something that I think is very important. The first thing that comes to mind, which would be the need for training for the teachers, to prepare the teachers for change. If we do not change the teacher's mindset, change will be impossible. And so, following from that, changing for what? And we were sharing with the people sitting next to me, and we were talking about how that change is necessary because we are facing 2 challenges right now. Number 1, there's a new type of student. Students today, students of the 21st century, are not the students we used to have at the end of the 20th century, not even 5 years ago. Students have changed dramatically the way they learn, the things that interest them. And secondly, another key element that has an impact on that challenge towards change would be everything related to new technologies, which imply a new way of learning. And so we need to respond to that new type of student and those new ways for interaction with technology and the new ways we learn.
2.
Cierto. Arturo Moscoso.
Arturo Moscoso from Bolivia, Jesuit. I really thank the 3 speakers for their presentations. These are very interesting, impactful presentations along the lines that José Alberto was suggesting, and it is very exciting to hear about these experiences, and it shows that another world, another way to teach is possible. And what I wanted to comment on, and the question I wanted to ask Mother Montserrat is this. She was speaking about, actually, let me preface that by saying that you think about the big differences between places, because of course all this new implementation costs money, I suppose. You do not just come along and do things, new classrooms, new things. That costs money. And beyond complaining that we do not have the means elsewhere in the world, it is about taking on the challenge and saying, yes, I believe this is possible with the means available to us in our context, in our reality, even if this is very expensive. We can do this. And so Mother Montserrat was speaking about Cameroon, and it's possible in Cameroon too. And I would love to know about that experience. I would like to learn from what is being done now. Why reinvent the wheel if people such as her can help us out? That is wonderful. And secondly, something that really caught my attention is this. It's not so much about curricular adaptations for special students, but rather seeing every single student as special. 35 students would be 35 learning styles, 35 different ways I need to adapt my teaching to them, which is very interesting. I would really like to highlight that. And finally, of course, just as the people who work for the Society of Users at large, we need to put forward that implementation, that teaching proposal and method within the Ignatian paradigm and spirit. And she was saying everything's pastoral. The school is the pastoral team, she was saying, and I would love to hear more about that, to hear about some guidance, or for her to share her secret with us.
3.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Sorry. Excuse me. Yeah. Enrique Caturla from Barcelona. I would like to highlight some things out of what we heard. I mean, well, the presentation has been extraordinary coming from Montserrat, and then the two experiences, they are different. Yes, it's true, different models, but I think they have really been fine-tuning to the same radio channel. Yeah, I mean, there are clearly common issues in the three, and this I think is very positive. Let us remember in the letter where we were kind of called to participate in the seminar that José Alberto was sending us, he was saying that Ignatian pedagogy right from the beginning has been or was eclectic. Right from the moment it started, it took what it thought was the best of the educational elements in the company, for example, the modus parisiensis and whatever you like. I mean, the way the University of Paris worked and so on. I think that nowadays the market, if you allow me to use the word, there are some publishers that use the word, the pedagogical market is important. I think we have contributions in the market, well, in the field of pedagogy and education psychology that are there. I mean, the very solid multiple intelligences, project work, special teamwork, and I think we should try and go for a summary in that pedagogical supermarket and select what we believe might be most adequate, most fitting. I've always believed in having methodological variety or diversity. Montserrat was saying so as well. I mean, I would never just link up to one single methodology. I think it's good and important to have methodological diversity, because in that way you deal with diversity. Not all students feel just as happy working with a specific methodology, so then methodological variety and diversity are interesting. As time goes on, I'm sure, and I'm well into my 3 minutes, just another comment. The importance of defining a contextualized curriculum. The freedom that we should be able to give ourselves in order to prioritize the contents of the curricula that we have to teach. I really think we have to feel free to choose those contents that we believe are a priority. The classical sentence of not many things, but yes, deeply, I think indeed should rule our criteria when selecting the curriculum. Then, a couple of remarks and I come to an end. There's a huge importance of space and time. The design of tempos and the design of spaces conditions the introduction of any innovation. If you design new spaces and new tempos, you are actually facilitating the introduction of change. So changing of these spaces and tempos will generate a new way of work amongst the teaching staff, and that will generate new methodology. And what did Montserrat say? Yeah, time. Okay, time. Yes. So time for action using methodologies, I think, is very interesting. And there are many things I would say, but I don't have time. So maybe I'll ask to talk later on. Thank you. Thank you for being so tolerant.
Number 4.
Bueno, Antonio España.
Antonio España from the School del Recuerdo in Madrid. What I was going to say was, well, yesterday the focus was on the person of conscience and being aware of the Ignatian identity, and now we've gone on to being competent, because we see that for the future, the person that goes to the 21st century world is going to be a different person. So here I have two problems. The three examples talk about curricular autonomy. Enrique was saying it too, the freedom of being able to choose. But then, however, our education is at the service of the states. So it's a political problem. How to have this autonomy as a school or network of schools when legislation is difficult and the ratio of number of students in the 16th, 17th and 18th centuries had an open field. Then regarding competent persons that might have greater motivation for study and for work, well, how to grow, how to get a kind of, a resource there of motivation methodologies.
Sí, Carlos Cupó,
Carlos Cupó from the Faculty of Theology. My remark is linked more to a theoretical level. I missed, and well, first of all, thank you for your presentations, okay? But I did miss a concept of competence that I believe is important. I was talking with Mother Montserrat yesterday. When in the contemplation of incarnation, for those of you that know the spiritual exercises, God looks at the surface of the earth and decides to become incarnate and carry out a redemption. And because of, and on the basis of this act, God is making human beings competent in their own salvation. Who and when decided that the Afro-Americans were competent in their moral training? Who decided, and when was it decided that women were competent to choose their political representatives? Who and when in the church said that lay people were competent to lead the church? Competence in this sense is what Ignatius in Manresa does not find. That is, spiritual persons. And that's why Ignatius started carrying out the exercises and wrote the exercises. And in order to make others competent in what they are not, he disseminated those exercises. So that in this sense of competence, I think this is important for the Society of Jesus. Enabling people to make others able after having acknowledged and recognized that they are competent. This is part of what we do, of what we must do, of our duty. I could give you more examples. But I think that I am conveying, or at least the idea I want to convey is this: competent is something to do with a declaration of principles, and the prophecy is right at the very center of discovering those whom God, not the modern states or educational plans, not the possibilities of a great city, but those whom God has made competent in the life of this world that we are managing. I think that not my school, but the network of the schools of the Society of Jesus has to respond to this, to make groups competent that are not competent yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Number 6.
Thank you. Jim Steger, United States. This is a comment about, it's the context of to what extent do people learn better in our already strong schools. And I'm going to talk about Cristo Rey schools, which, as you know, are a model serving only students from poor families in the United States. And the students work 5 full school days each month in some business, which pays the school and therefore supports the cost of the school. These schools have, part of their goal is to take these students who, when they begin, these are high schools, when they begin, are 2 or more years behind grade level by normal testing, and to bring them up to grade level and set them up to succeed in a 4-year university. And they're successful in doing this so far, getting more successful. But what's so interesting is if you talk to the students about what do you enjoy most and where do you learn most, they'll say, in my workplace. Even though the schools, these are new schools in new buildings, in a sense. But even in that situation, the students report that what they're doing, their teaching is a traditional teaching, teacher-oriented. Well-refined, very sophisticated, really worked on to get it to be highly professional for these particular students. But the students still say they learn more in their workplace. That really says something about the model we heard earlier this morning, I think, about its validity, perhaps, and makes it even more interesting for me, perhaps for you also.
Thank you, Jim. Number 7.
Sorry, I keep talking. Paul Donovan from Montreal, Canada. I just wanted to answer a little bit, or offer a reflection on your question about the why do this. I just want to say, first of all, I actually can't stand the expression students for the 21st century. I really can't, and part of the reason why it bothers me so much is it makes me think we're training our kids for the world. And I don't think that's what we're about at all. And that, to me, is going to get at the root of why we need to change. So I just wanted to give this as an example. I'm going to tell you guys the following. I'm a sinner. I'm going to tell you that God loves me. I'm going to tell you that he loves me enough that he died for me, and then he invites me to work for me. So you guys have now all done the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. Those are the 4 weeks. You've done them now because I've told you about them. The exercises aren't about that. They're about the experience of doing it. And for me, what we do in our schools is very often, I'll tell you those 4 things and say, now you've done the exercises. It's very much the opposite of what St. Ignatius wanted to do. So when we look at the change that's necessary, I think it happens on the level of what our kids are actually experiencing, not just what they know in their head. And that's for the ones that are already there. I alluded to this earlier, and for me, this is so essential. In my context, we're the only Catholic school for English kids for the area of Montreal. We're the only one. And every year, when I would get all of the applications that would come in for the school, I would have to say to all sorts of kids, I'm sorry, you can't come here because you don't qualify academically, or you don't have whatever our criteria is. And they have no alternative. They have no other place to go. If what we did as a school worked in a way that was similar to the kinds of things that we're seeing, or much more like that, then I believe that those kids would be able to have the kind of experience that right now only the brightest, what we call the brightest of our kids, could have. And if what we're about is forming leaders, if we define leaders as only those who are capable in the model that we use right now, then I don't believe that we're actually accomplishing what it is we're supposed to be doing as Jesuit schools. And that, for me, is the motivation to change. But that's a very difficult one to get across to boards, to parents. We just did a strategic plan, and we polled all the parents in the school and all the alumni, and one of the big things that came back is don't change Loyola. Well, when you have that, and then you're talking about implementing something that's a change, and your constituent group is saying, hey, you're doing well, don't change, that becomes very difficult. So, sorry I keep going, but the main thing for me is there has to be a buy-in of what we're all about if we're going to convince people that change is necessary.
Thank you, Paul. Here, Chris, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So first, Chris.
Thank you, Jose. Chris Gleason from Australia. I'd like to ask one question, if I could, and make 2 brief comments. In Australia, we have 10 schools. We have 5 of our own Jesuit-owned schools and 5 of what we call Jesuit partner schools, who have bought into the Ignatian legacy and tradition and ethos. The question is, how do I know that I've got a network? And what are the criteria for that? And is that enough? Should we be looking more at something like an educational community or an educational family? So I'd like to ask that question. The comment is one about spirituality. I couldn't help but think this morning, listening to that wonderful presentation from Sister Montserrat, that this is all about accompaniment. And that image of the teacher as retreat director. That's a comment. The other comment I'd like to make is that I think the translator or translators are doing a brilliant job.
Thank you, Chris. Number 2.
I'm Casey Bomir from Boston. I just want to say something. It was in Carlos's comment that I was brought to St. Ignatius in his convalescing at Loyola Castle. That in the process of convalescing, I think there's a little bit of a lesson for what we're talking about in terms of competency. That his inclination in convalescing is to slow down and then to read. That it's a complete rupture of his way of proceeding. That he stops and he turns to texts. And I think there's something of competence in that our process for Jesuit education, I think, is very deliberate. And that there's something, I think, when we think about change, there's something of a quickening temptation. And that's why I like our conversation right now, is that there's a deliberation. You're slowing it down to look at what's that process going to look like, and isn't there something about the slowness of transformation that's not bad. I think that's a good way of proceeding. So with all the technology, with all of the pressure, I hear things about in 5 years' time, things are going to be so much more different. Well, we want to be solid on the foundation of our spirituality. And I look to him in his period of convalescing as a time of competency building. And then he turns to the life of Jesus, the life of good example. And that's what happens in boredom. A new teacher or a new student at a Jesuit school isn't bored at the beginning. And I think that's significant, that when we come and we repeat something, whether it's in preaching or whether it's in teaching, there's always a temptation to become bored. So part of what I think we're talking about is, how do we refresh as teachers? How does that refreshment occur? And I think that deliberation, that recognition that there's something about curriculum and transformation that is also in the spirit of Ignatian convalescence. That even in his convalescence, we can look to a process of learning that speaks to the way that we might work within the context of a Jesuit school. I'm not saying that we're sick or that the world is sick at all, but I'm saying that there's a time of recovery, and that people come to the school to be recovered, to be refounded, and that's even the case for us every year as we come back to the classroom over and over again.
Thank
Los
you.
cimientos, y eso incluso nos ocurre a nosotros.
Number 3,
Cada año
please.
volvemos, ¿no? Al aula, a la clase, siempre.
Eamon McGuinness, I'm almost apologizing for getting up again, but I couldn't resist, if that's okay. There's a lot of questions, understandably,
Sí,
about
perdón por volver a
how
ponerme de
can we
pie.
make the change? How can we make the breakthrough? And
Hay
it
muchas
reminded me
preguntas
of a quote from Henry Ford,
En cuanto a
who's
cómo
reputed
queremos
to have
cambiar,
said,
cómo podemos
if I asked my existing
operar ese
customers
cambio.
what they wanted, they
Me
would have
gustaría
asked me
mencionar
for a
una
faster
cita de
horse.
Henry Ford.
So,
Si yo
I
preguntara a
would
mis
say that
clientes actuales lo que quieren,
if we as educators believe
me dirían que
that
quieren
our
un caballo
customers
más
would
rápido.
benefit from an automobile, it's our responsibility to create the automobile and give people an opportunity to drive it, as Ignatius did, and the first companions and the first Jesuits, they looked at the best of what was happening and they created a new model of education that was perhaps revolutionary. And the people flocked to it. So it's a kind of a case of, if we build it, they will come.
Thank you, Eamon. Now, number 3, I want to call your attention to 2 things. First, remember that this is via streaming, so the cameras are this way, so it's better probably for them not to move too much when you are talking, and you can face the cameras in some ways better than to give the back to the world. So, number 3.
My name again is Ikenna Ike Chief. I'm from Jesuit Memorial College in Nigeria. I guess change is a way of life. But I don't know if we change for the sake of change. I think we change to respond to situations, to be more dynamic, to be more competent to respond. There's so many varieties and complexities in the issues of our world, if you like the term signs of the times. In some areas, it's Islamic insurgencies. In some areas, it is poverty that breeds prostitution and armed robbery, influenced by greed of the politicians. In some areas, it is simply degradation of the environment. Many of them. And so I'm wondering, do we have models of change that can respond contextually in particular areas in our schools? You know, and the kind of change I'm looking for with an inbuilt dynamism that can respond to new issues as they come. Do we have just one kind of change that fits every situation? So when we're talking about change, so it's not abstract. And I'm looking at, for instance, what is happening in Guatemala, and I'm saying they're facing a particular issue or issues in their area. Do I have similar challenges in my own, or do I have different challenges? And so what can I take from there? Maybe nothing, maybe something. How can I respond in my own particular areas? So what I'm thinking about is, are there ways we can, talk about change vis-a-vis concrete challenges of our world, so that way we can develop models of responding to each as they come. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 3.
Mirar a la cámara de allá. Si no, quedo muy... Juan Cristóbal, de Chile. Está...
I'm from Chile. I was thinking, while I was listening to everything that was being said, I was just getting worried a little bit about a certain naivety I'd say we may incur with regards to change. It worries me that we might assume as something obvious that our schools are successful, when, at least in my country, it's been rather questioned whether the Catholic schools have been reproducing certain systems and certain patterns, and the way we've been educating, and to what extent we were really producing people who showed solidarity or not with regards to social class and all sorts of considerations. And this is a concern. And in a global, secularized, individualistic world, this is a concern. I'd say we ought to bring this into the picture when we talk about discerning a change. I'd say we need to go deeper into the reasons for change, and I love what our colleague from Canada said about that, and that's actually where the motivation for change lays, and we need to really go deeper into these reflections. And concerning discernment, there's a number of pedagogical avenues that we could travel. And my experience with the new generations in the last 8 years working with young people is that there are certain things where we are not really hitting the nail on the head. In my country, we say in a world of blind people, if you are one-eyed, you are king. And I'm just worried about, this and how perhaps we are losing touch of what's happening, the disintegration in the lives of many young people, and how we are losing touch a little bit, or perhaps not developing the pedagogical avenues that respond to that situation, because we've got a lot of technology, but higher rates of depression around young people and among young people. And I'd say, let us make sure we don't bring our mistakes along with us when we renovate things.
So let's mind the time, and we will have so many as in 5 minutes we can do. Please.
Okay, my name is Thomas. I'm from Cameroon. So when I listen at the three presentation of today, I have like a mixed feeling. The first feeling is that I'm wondering, oh my God, is that possible with all this new technology that requires a lot of money? Are we able to face this? But the second feeling is also that this is good news, because maybe the sisters say is possible, and they know they work, they have projects in my country, and maybe they know this. The government is moving from the objective, we say the objective method to the competent method. All the country is moving to that method. So I think for that, maybe this is a good news. But the problem is that for 3 years, as the government announced that let us move to this competent method, we don't find the practical way to do it. Even the government doesn't find because teachers do not want to change. This is the first problem I realize. All of us here, maybe many people have this problem. So what can we do to bring this change, and how can it be possible if we remove this technological part of the new change? Because I think we can have new schools in old buildings too. Maybe that's what we can do. So how, if we don't take in account this high technological aspect of the problem, so what can we do to bring this change and to have people really competent in what they do to respond to the realities of our context? So this is my concern.
Thank you. And I think that we had time for the last. Okay.
Sí, Javier Aragay.
Javier Aragay from Barcelona. Very quickly, I just want to speak about the experience that Pepe Menendez has shared, trying to answer some of the questions we are posing. Number one, we need to work hard and calmly on the need for change. We need to work on what kind of change and for what. Is it related to the mission? What is it related to? We cannot just throw ourselves into change and just for the sake of changing with the managing team, with the educators and so on. This is a process and a long process. It took us 2 years. Second idea. Once you are convinced you need to change and you need to work to get to that point, then you need to ask yourself, what kind of a strategy for change am I going to go for? It's not about just coming up with new pedagogical theories or methods, but rather draft up strategies for cultural and personal change. This is very important. And so you need to define the strategy, and there's no single model, otherwise we would have copied it. You need to generate it in your own context. You need to reflect upon it and think hard about it. And so in my context, what kind of a strategy for change am I going to implement? That's the question. These are not techniques. This is a transformational change where these students, these excellent people are at the center. It's not about more technology, but about recovering or the person back to the center of the stage and the center of everything we do. So first and foremost, we must be autonomous. Antonio España was asking about the authorities. We're doing it. center, school autonomy, the center's own project. Yes, this is good, but we need to believe in this. Sometimes we depend on the official curricula and the administration far more than we ought to. We must empower ourselves and believe ourselves that we can come up with a different model, and it can be done, believe me. Then at lunch, you can ask Mother Montserrat how they do it, because she hasn't really gone into that, but during lunch, I'm sure she'll share. And number three, third comment, money is a very good excuse to stand still and do nothing. All these things are not that expensive. It's not about money, but rather project, leadership, enthusiasm. And if those things are there, resources will come.
I think that we are now need to move to the next step. And as you remember, now we will have time for personal reflection. So I'm going to invite you, since we are here in the Cova de Manresa, in the cave of Manresa, to maybe use the general exam that we talked so much yesterday. These are the 5 steps that St. Ignatius suggests to us, and maybe we can use this. And remember that this is a tool for discernment, is to see how God is talking to us. And the idea is that these 30 minutes that we're going to have can help us to see how God is talking to us, to me personally, and maybe to us as a group today. So that's the invitation. And I guess we cannot have a better framework for that than Manresa. Some of you said, and Montserrat also said today, that part of the problem is fear. Fear. Oh my gosh, we all know what fear is. So I'm sure that St. Ignatius, I am an expert of what happened here in Manresa, but I'm sure he felt many times fear here in Manresa. And well, that's the invitation that we had to hear God in the gospel saying to us, do not fear. Do not fear. So that's the invitation now. So we will have until 1 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock p.m. we will have our lunch. So please take advantage. You can stay here, go down to the Cova of Manresa. When can you have that opportunity to say, I'm going to do my exam at the Cova? So you choose your place and take advantage of this beautiful time. Thank you.